Here, give me that. Everybody take it easy. Especially you, Riggs.
Riggs? You Martin Riggs?
Yeah, the Chicago Riggses. What's your name? What's your name?
Pierre
Von Wersch. Oh, fuck, I'll just call you Adolf. Are you Arjun Red, Aryan, what? That's you.
It's official.
Yeah.
They are official. Under the Diplomatic Relations Act, no diplomatic agent may be detained or arrested
Once his identity has been established.
And we do have a serious diplomatic situation here.
Do you expect me to talk?
Episode 205 of Do You Expect Us to Talk? I'm your host Becca, and as always joined by my fellow co-hosts Chris and Dave. How are you both?
Yeah, good evening, folks.
I'm feeling even older for this shit.
Oh dear.
This film will make a great drinking movie. I figured out the number of times that he goes shit, and literally if you have a shot every time he says it, you'd be blotto by the end of it.
I'm rewatching 24 at the moment, and the one for that would be Damn It.
Yeah, he says that so many times.
It's not exactly a new observation given the age of the show, but like we're rewatching it, and it's like I meant to say to like my partner early on, like listen out for how often he says "damn it," and of course it's so far in there she hasn't mentioned it yet. I might have to say like, have you noticed he's saying it's constant?
He says "damn it" every other word. Damn it.
Yeah.
It's because they couldn't swear. Well, they decided not to swear, so they could like keep like the violence in it. So he just said like,
got to keep it like a 15.
Yeah.
There's probably a few like F-bombs that might go underneath the radar. But
oh dear,
you know.
It just makes me, what a fucked up society we live in. It's like, yes, you can like pass electric charge through this person's nipples, providing you don't
But you can't say F
before you're doing it.
But what I kind of like is the show kind of embraces that. You go like, yeah, we're just gonna like kind of make it a point. you
can show extreme torture, but you can't do.
They're ripping out someone's teeth and going, cheesy comestibles, that hurts.
Ow, chihuahua.
Oh, chihuahua.
Fun you here. Yeah.
Oh, fudge.
That's great.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like on US network TV. I can imagine it would be just as bad, if not worse.
They chop huge
but the big
sections
thing
out
on
of it,
the big thing on British TV when we were growing up was they were sensitive to violence, and the British Board of Film Classification and network sort of regulators were unusually sensitive about certain things. Like we didn't see headbutts in films for years. Headbutts was a thing.
Like GoldenEye was edited out.
Yeah, GoldenEye was famously banned, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it wasn't banned.
The film
it had
wasn't
the headbutt
banned,
scene
but like a couple of
no, but that scene was removed.
Yeah, and that was happening in films.
Nunchucks as well. That was a thing.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to be such a thing now. Obviously, something like RoboCop was cut quite significantly, but the funny thing was, they would leave in the scenes with all the swearing in, but dub the swearing. Now,
oh, really?
In these films, yeah. So you got melon farmers, muddy funsters, that sort of thing. In Coming to America, where he says, yes, yes, fuck you too, it's like, yes, and the same to you too, and things like that. So they tended to leave the scenes in. I don't know what it would be like in North America, but it was... I don't know. Did the film lose a lot? It was the fact that they were replacing the words with words that no one would ever use that made it really stand out. In some respects, you're like, well, just cut it then.
In really bad dub as well.
Yeah, don't have them say muddy funster. It's just, that's not a word. No one says that to each other. Yeah, if you want to see a parody of it, on the Cornetto trilogy, it's an extra
that's true,
each one of the discs where they played a few scenes where they were told they had to provide like what they call the airline edit, and they're calling each other prinks and stuff like that.
You have to be like, pardon? Oh yeah, when you said sort of dub it, I kind of thought, oh, what in a foreign language, but no, not dubbing like that.
No.
Oh.
They would leave the scenes that had swearing in and then dub over the swearing.
Yeah, it was
And
silly words.
sometimes I think it was done at the time because it would sound like the original actor, but I think a lot of the times it would be a vaguely sound alike, wouldn't it, Chris?
Yeah, it'd be really bad sometimes. I remember there was a really bad Bruce Willis one where it's just like a guy sort of doing like a kind of like a really sort of Bruce Willis like impression over like what would be like a bad word, and it's just it really kind of like, oh, is there any need? Like, you know, given the fact that it was like already after 9 o'clock anyway, you just think, fucking hell, you know. But
Yeah.
it is weird. I mean, what we've noticed it's still kind of happened because we know with the Disney Plus thing, they've got well, for those that don't know, I'm sure everyone knows they've introduced more adult in quotation marks. Material.
Yes, we're not talking about porn. We're talking about stuff that would be aimed at grown-ups rather than
Yeah,
families.
so 18 rated.
And so they've included things like, you know, Family Guy and things like that, and American Dad, you know, which is more like, you know, more adult, you know, more risque in its humour. And they bleeped out some of the swear words, and you just think, why?
What have you done that for?
What?
Like, I can understand it if they just put it in regular Disney Plus, like aimed more for kids.
They've made a fundamental mistake with that app in that they've put all the films into. Yes, at the top you've got like the tab for Star and the tab for like Marvel and stuff, but if you go to like all movies A to Z, you'll get all of them, right?
Yeah.
What they've done is like given you the option to like age rate it, so 15, 18, whatever. I don't understand why they haven't just put Star behind like in its own subsection of the site.
Yeah, because that would make sense.
So when you search all movies A to Z, you don't get the option of gross point blank if you're a child. So I don't know, but I know when it was just the Disney films on there, they did sort of airbrush sort of Daryl Hannah's backside in Splash and stuff like that. I've been watching just as we've alluded to. I've been watching 24 again, and in the first series, we got to a point where I said, I think I've misremembered this, and then I realised they'd edited it. There's a scene, spoiler alert for 24 season 1, Jack's wife gets effectively raped in the original cut of it, in that her daughter's about to be raped, and she kind of like shoos the rapist off somewhere else and does what needs to be done to protect her daughter. None of that, and I did not take my eyes off the screen, was in it. And then suddenly she's at the hospital later on being like saying she's been raped and getting like tested to see for STDs and pregnancy and everything else, although pregnancy would have had to be fucking instant. So their editorial decisions are a bit odd. But there you go.
Yeah, because you think like, well, you just openly talked about it, but
yeah,
you know, and it's not like the rape happened on screen.
You didn't see the rape. She took him into a back room, and it was sort of a quietly. It was kind of a take him by the hand and just quietly lead him away.
Yeah,
I don't understand, and yet severe beatings and all that are still in it. I don't know. I don't really understand. But yeah, they fundamentally structured the site wrong. Star should be its own subsection, or mini app, or something.
Because it makes you, well, you know, I don't know. It makes me and my partner like loves Family Guy, and she's like, "Oh, great, Family Guy and American Dad on there," and she's like, "I can't believe it just beeped out. It really fucks me off." So she's like, "Well, you know, I'll stick with the DVDs then, because you know, cause it just completely ruined." I mean, fair enough, you've watched it. I mean, I won't mind it if it had like the more edited, you know, option, if you're going to be watching it with younger adults or children, whatever. If that was, you know, if it was an option, do you know what I mean? Like, you could like have.
But again, they're giving you the opportunity to password protect the site.
Yeah.
But whilst I understand the need to monitor what children watch, if you've got, I don't know, I'm not a very good judge of what kids should watch anyway. But let's say you've got an 8 or 9 year old and you let them use the TV by themselves. They should be able to go into the Disney app, go to all films A to Z, and just see the Disney Plus films. They shouldn't even be seeing that high fidelity and like Gross Point Blank's on there. And we're not talking about super violent films there, by the way. Well, Gross Point Blank has its moments. But
we do think that all children should be protected from John Cusack.
Yeah, definitely. Particularly in Max. But yeah, it's I don't know, the relevance of that. I mean, we did kind of just go off the point, really, but it is relevant in that I think most of our early memories of these films are the hyper fucking edited versions, aren't they?
Yeah, well, I mean, this was quite cut as well in the UK. I think even theatrically, I think it was there was actually quite a few notable bits that, particularly violent stuff, that was cut. Just for like sheer violence of some of it. Some of it is a bit unnecessary, but then again, it was like kind of the era where they were just cutting everything for
it was cinemas. Cinemas were getting studios were getting ever more audacious in what they throw into fairly mainstream films, and TV was getting more and more sort of tough on what it would cut out of them. So yeah, there were bits in this film that I thought I wonder if they would get away with now. But again, it was more sort of language and attitudes. But we'll get to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's been declassified as a 15 now, where it was thought it was an 18, and that was with the cuts as well. It was still an 18 with some
I know
violence
the first was an 18, and I know the third was a 15. I thought the second would scrape to 15. Are you saying it was an 18 on first release?
Yeah, on first it's been like moved down to a 15.
Again, obviously, we're talking British ratings there. I can imagine the difficulty in sort of for any, because I know we got quite a lot of sort of listeners from outside the UK and North America particularly. That for those who don't know, we've got like a universal rating. I suppose that would be, I don't know what that would be equivalent to, G, I suppose, over there. Then you've got PG, so have we. You've got PG-13, we've got a 12A, we call it. So there's a year in it, but it's roughly equivalent. And then you've got R-rated. I know you've got NC-17X unrated and everything else, but those are the mainstream ratings. Now, we've got a 15 and an 18 rating. And whilst they normally marry up, firstly, it's two different bodies and they're looking at slightly different things. But also, you do occasionally get films that sort of would fall in the middle and go to one extreme or the other. So you got an R-rated Batman versus Superman longer cut that was like, R-rated, and it was still a 12A in this country because it wasn't quite bad enough to be a 15. But you don't really have whoever looked at yours thought it's not quite a PG-13, and if it's not quite a PG-13, you've got no choice but R. So that's what we're talking about with 15s and 18s.
A point also as well with the American rating system is like, well, with when it comes to a 15, it means like no one like above under the age of 15 can see it. Whereas like with R, like you know anyone like under I don't know what the age is, but basically younger 17, kids can go and watch it with an adult.
I think it's 17 because the NC-17 is no children under 17, so that's not discretionary. But most theatre chains, I understand, won't show that. So an R rating, if you're an adult and you've got like an 8-year-old and you want to take them into an R, you can. Here's not the case. They are hard age ratings, with the exception of 12, which is advisory. And the reason you have to be with an adult, but that was a hard age rating until Spider-Man.
I thought it was 12. Yeah, it's 12A, wasn't it? No,
it's 12A now, but it was originally a 12. The summer of Spider-Man changed it because it came out as a 12. Parents complained. It then got like a re-release or something after the World Cup. It was a World Cup year, a football World Cup year. So that plays havoc with schedules, particularly films that are aimed quote unquote at boys and men, because that's still the way it's seen, So endless Bridget Jones films could be shown or something, but like, if it's a Fast and Furious film or something, they try and avoid clashing it with the World Cup. So it came out again in later summer as a 12A for two reasons. Firstly, the World Cup, and secondly, the fact parents have complained so bitterly that like, why are you stopping kids seeing this? And they changed the 12 to a 12A.
And without any cuts, though, if I understand correctly, there was no like edits on it at all, was there?
I don't recall any.
So basically, sort of, people complain. They thought, okay, fine.
They've just softened the 12 to a 12A. That's all. They've just softened it slightly. That you can take a 6-year-old in to see a 12 if you want, whereas before you couldn't. Which was a bit harsh because getting a 12 was so easily done because American films aim at a PG-13 quite often. So it's very hard to classify them as anything less. But it's
And now
never
that's a standard
been-
now for every film. It's like every film aims
It's what they
down
aim
for a
for.
12A.
Yeah, that's what they aim for. Well, PG-13, I suppose, because American, but yeah. But yeah, so I just remember whenever I think of these sort of TV cuts of films, I think of the Lethal Weapon franchise first, which means I must have seen cuts and shots of like Mel Gibson saying stuff like Muddy Funster, which is quite funny. I was also reminded of how times change earlier because I posted it to our Facebook page because it was of its time and so what. But Vic and Bob doing this film, and I'd forgotten like Bob was in blackface. You couldn't do that now at all.
No, you wouldn't get. Even though the whole thing is ridiculous and everyone knows it, do you know what I mean? It's like, but
I'm not going to comment on it because I'm completely the wrong demographic to have an opinion taken seriously on it. So I just accept you can't do it, and that's fine. But at the same time, when I saw that sketch, I didn't pause about posting it because I just thought it's a funny little thing from 25 years ago.
yeah,
I mean, I think if any comics in the world are going to get away with that, it would be Vic and Bob because they're just so ludicrous in everything they do. I mean, he played Max from Heart to Heart with biscotti on his face. Yeah, amaretto biscuits or something. You know, it was like that they are just inherently ridiculous. They played Slade as obsessed with copper soup. You know, so it's on our Facebook page, but it is. I referred to it in the first episode.
I mean, it ends with them like drinking bitter in the bathtubs.
Yeah, I'd forgotten the blackface bit. It's obvious when you think about it because of the leads from the original film, but I just didn't give it a thought. But the other thing I thought that was, just before we go into sort of making and original thoughts, is just some overall observations, I suppose. I mean, the smoking one was in it last week. You can't really smoke in a mainstream film now, unless you're evil. And even then, it depends. If it's aimed at a family, certainly not. But the other thing was use of the sort of racial slur that they use in South Africa, because it's their version of the N-word.
Yeah.
And you couldn't put Tarantino aside, I suppose, and certain other demographics. Mainstream appeal films are not going to feature that word very often at all. And yet it's liberally sprayed all over this film, isn't it?
I mean, in fairness, it is used by the bad guys. And it is kind of, I mean, again, of its time, it was probably being topical. I can't think of any other like mainstream Hollywood film that did have South Africans in that touched on it. But
not off the top of my head.
I mean,
certainly not mainstream crowd pleasers.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's all sorts of film. You know, there's not an atrocity or an injustice in the world that hasn't been dealt with somewhere on film. But like mainstream appeal films that are designed to take hundreds of millions. Yeah, no, I found this quite. It dates the film, obviously, in the same way that the same year Rambo 3 had, you know, dedicated the film to the Mujahideen. You know, there's a little bit of that in it. And they are played slightly for pantomime villains, to say the least. But I was quite happy to just take it as a relic of its era.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I don't think, especially considering it's America, it is a racial. I mean, I don't really understand. I mean, I'm not like astute on the politics of South Africa, so I can't really sort of give too much in depth. But I would say, given the fact that it was in America and it's a racial slur that's from a different country, it won't hold the same. It won't hold the same weight, like sort of saying it over here as the N-word would. If you know what I mean, it wouldn't because it's like
it doesn't have the same cultural reach.
Yeah, it
in
does
our parts of the world.
Yeah,
Obviously, it would in parts of Africa, but yes.
Yeah, but even then, I wouldn't be. I like to say either way because I don't, because it's a different country. I don't know what like. I mean, it's still offensive, but I in terms, is it quite the same? I don't know. I can't really say. But
Okay. I think we'll err on the side of caution and not say it, other than the very last joke of the film is a play on it, and I have to admit I found that quite funny.
I was gonna say that unfortunately that did make me laugh, but then I was like, I probably shouldn't laugh. But it is clever, but it turns the whole idea like on its head because it is so hideous, it is so awful. But I did kind of find myself guiltily, and I was like, oh, I shouldn't laugh.
A tiny bit of background on the film, and just tiny amount, because hardly anything's changed. Richard, same two leads, obviously. It's still a Shane Black story. This time, though, the screenplay is written by Jeffrey Boehm, who died relatively young. He died in his 50s. But looking at his work, he did Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, the script. I mean, we know he won't have done the story because that's not how Lucasfilm worked back then, but he certainly did that. He ended up doing the follow-up to this. He did the Chevy Chase film, Funny Farm. He did Inner Space and The Lost Boys and The Dead Zone. So he did some real cult films in the 80s. He co-wrote The Witches of Eastwick. So he didn't have a massive filmography, but he had a relatively strong one. But it's the same...
we did The Dead Zone as well.
Yeah, I thought I just said that. Sorry if I did. The Dead Zone, for anyone who's not seen it, it's worth watching. It's a Christopher Walken film. I think Martin Sheen's in it as well. It's really good. Stephen King adaptations are hit and miss.
That's quite a good one, though.
Yeah.
The Dead Zone's really
made
good.
by Cronenberg as well.
No, there we are.
Yeah, so it looks kind of interesting and a bit bloodshot and weird, but it plays weird in a fairly normal environment and things like that, and that's very Cronenberg's move, really. But yeah, it's the same cinematographer and it's music by the same people, Kamen and Clapton again. So
The winning team.
the point, and it's still edited by Stuart Baird, so there's absolute continuity here. It's the same team turning up a couple of years later to see if they can sort of repeat the trick.
And they did.
They did. What I didn't see, and I'm just going to go back to last week because I've completely forgotten, is... Okay, this film cost about double what the first one cost, but it took nearly double as well. I'd be interested to know, and I'll just check in a minute whether this is the high water mark. We'll see. I'm not going to announce that this week, sorry. No, okay. We'll talk about that when we get to the last two films in the series. That's it on background. In terms of me with the film, it's exactly the same as last week. Boringly predictable. I cannot remember when I first saw it. I remember certain bits about it. I remember the sort of him yelling diplomatic immunity near the end, partly because Kevin Smith has made fun of that for years. Patsy Kensit stood out like a sore thumb to me, but that's because she's so well known, or was certainly so well known in this country, and not really chiefly for her acting, if truth be told. When the film started tonight and I was watching it, that first scene with Hans, the guy they're chasing in the car, I was trying so desperately to place him, and for a moment I wondered if it was Jigsaw, but it's not. Mark Walston, he's probably best known for playing Boggs in The Shawshank Redemption, the guy who was basically raping Andy Dufresne in it. And the only other people I sort of just wanted to quickly point out before we go any further is Jeanette Goldstein is in this. She was Vasquez in Aliens, and she was also John Connor's adoptive mum in Terminator 2, amongst other things. And Dean Norris is a detective. Dean Norris is probably best known now for his role in Breaking Bad as Walter White's brother-in-law.
Yeah, he's popped up in other films. He's in Terminator 2, actually. He's one of like the SWAT guys. Towards the end of the film, but he's also in Total Recall. He's the kind of guy with the kind of weird kind of, or like that. Well, I say guy, that kind of alien with the weird kind of like scar across his face.
Yeah.
With one of that's him.
He's been in lots and lots of stuff. I mean, I'm just running through his filmography now, and it's just a load of films.
Yeah, there's lots of roles, actors in this film that have been, it's like kind of almost like before they were famous. Been in lots of other different things, so I kind of like, oh, he's from so and so, he's from so and so. But yeah, I recognised Dean Norris. So I was like, oh, I know that guy.
He was in The Last Seduction, which is the best film hardly anyone I ever talked to has seen. Linda Fiorentino's birthday it was yesterday. A real sort of later attempt at film noir. It's really good. The Last Seduction. He's Gattaca.
Not Jade.
Not Jade. No, that was David.
That's
Caruso.
freaking that the day. But I've not seen that. I've kind of wanted to see it because I know it's meant to be terrible.
I've seen Jade. It's just nothing really. But The Last Seduction is really, really good. And she's really, really good in it. It's one of those films that you watch and you just go, how was she not a much, much bigger star?
Yeah.
Because she was just, I've rarely seen screen presence like it. She's incredible in it, and the film is really, really good. But yeah, so again, I can't say too much more in terms of like build into this because I really just don't remember when I first saw it. What about you guys?
Is it the first time for you, Becca, this viewing?
Yeah. This series I've never seen before. Although this film I might have seen it like on video or something years ago. And I remember the exploding pool scene and the exploding toilet scene. Oh my god. I don't know why those two stand out at me. I think it's just because the stunts are just so audacious. But yeah, apart from that, all these Lethal Weapon movies, I've never ever seen them, so I'll probably be watching them like for the first time.
Yeah.
Whilst we go through the series, I know you guys have seen it all before. Maybe seen it at the cinema, but yeah, for me, I've been saving it up especially. So.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember when I actually first saw this because it was I watched it on TV and I can't remember because I think it was. I want to say it was on at the same time as Airplane, and this was like back in the day where like I didn't have a VHS because I think I was in a hotel room, so I was like, kind of flipping between the two. So doing that thing where you kind of like flipping between. So I was first watching like both those movies for the first time, and like had to flip through both of them. So that was kind of like my first experience of watching this one. But it's been like Lethal Weapon. It's been like a film that like pops up every so often, and I used to always get a little bit excited when this one was on because I think I've seen Lethal Weapon more, but when this one came on TV back in the day, I was like, oh yeah, got to see this one because I think it's just a lot more like action orientated as well. I think the action scenes are a bit more are ramped up a bit more.
I'd say so. I certainly know when I watched the first one. There are exceptions, and I certainly don't think the action's bad. But when I watched it again last week, the action was almost a distraction. I wanted it almost more like Pulp Fiction with Jules and like Vincent. I wanted them just sort of sat around nattering in like diners and stuff.
Yeah,
I wasn't that fussed about the action set pieces. I think the film starts faster this time and stays a bit faster. With some exceptions, I don't think it holds its pace quite as well throughout, in that there's quite a baggy section after that first opening bit. There was just a bit where Riggs is, I think he was cooking, wasn't he? And he's talking to Murtaugh's wife in the kitchen because he just eats there a lot and his laundry's done there, although he still lives in that trailer. Is it a trailer or is it a little apartment now, a little beach house or something? But yeah,
it's like a trailer, yeah.
He still lives there, but the point is, he was there talking about the death of his wife, which I'm glad was there as a scene, in that it put a bit of meat on the bone. It was complete setup for the payoff that's coming later on. It told you something about his mental state, given how he was, what his demeanor was like telling the story. But I do remember looking at the clock and it was like, I don't know, 18, 19 minutes in, and I was thinking the first one kept a much more sort of steady pace than this one. This one's a bit more sort of peaks and troughs. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, well, yeah, it was kind of rewritten though, because obviously it's story by Shane Black, though how much of that story is there, because he initially wrote a script for it that was played cool. Well, he called it Play Dirty, but that's just like the working title of the script, whatever.
I did hear Riggs dies at the end of that script.
Yeah, and his general thesis was obviously a lot darker, and it would be like the idea reading what Shane Black wrote said like, well, Riggs would literally would sacrifice himself to like save like Murtaugh and his family. Was the idea. Now how that happens in the story, I don't know because it's not been released, but it was like sort of stuff
the end
like...
film is similar enough that you've only got to tweak the final scene, and you've got that. So,
but it would be like
very similar, but you don't know.
It would be like there's the Easter end and a big sort of like bushfire somewhere, there's talk of like a plane being exploded filled with cocaine, and then like snowing Los Angeles with cocaine, like it's snow. It's like kind of lots of like sort of stuff like that, but eventually like very sort of dark.
Always keep your mouth or nostrils open when you're watching a plane crash.
Yes. But yeah, no, it's sort of and sort of wanted to make like a bit of a emotional ending with it, obviously with Riggs dying, but I think that's probably sounds more right thinking about it continuity when you think about the first film and just how much of a tragic character Riggs is. It makes sense for him to kind of go down that path.
I think it makes sense in actually the context of the film we got, in that 3 and 4 comes along and changes this somewhat from memory. Well, certainly, I say from memory, like I might be wrong. Definitely. Think of the last scene of the final film. I mean, we know what's coming. Becca doesn't, but things do get a little bit better for Riggs. Let's just say that.
Spoiler alert.
But at this stage, this is a guy that is looking like he'll never be happy again. And actually, to be able to get by and function somewhat normally and find a little bit of happiness around a family and a few laughs and a few like exciting, work days and missions and things like that. To die at the end of that would almost be a win. Like he had a couple of years at the end that was sort of tolerable. There is something about this film that is totally unbalanced in the way that the first one isn't. Now, I don't think it's a bad film at all. Just sort of straying into opening thoughts here. I don't think it's a bad film at all. I enjoyed it. I think the action's a little bit better. I think the lethal weapon of the title, you're absolutely right in what you said, Becca, last week, because I remember the tagline when this film came out. I was only about 11 when it came out, but it said something like, Danny Glover carries a lethal weapon, Mel Gibson is one. So the lethal weapon of the title is Mel Gibson. That's the theory anyway. And I think, and this is from memory, because I can't quite remember the tone of the third one too well, this is the last time where he feels in any way that. There's still a slight unpredictability to him. There's still a little bit of devil may care about it all. There's still a little bit of I'm more stable now and I'm not going to put anyone else's life in danger, but that doesn't necessarily speak for my own. I will still take some degree of risk. And when we watch the first film, because you're cutting between some wisecracks and him sat, with a gun in his mouth, that should play really dark. But because I think what I think I came to last week is because I think we start on such a dark scene with Mrs. Woody Boyd, I think we were primed for this kind of like black nature to it and the humor in it. This film I thought was a lot more unbalanced, as evidenced by the fact that he's just been shot and he's laughing and joking with Murtaugh moments, within minutes, if not hours at most, of a woman he's just got involved with being killed and finding out what happened to his wife. I know he's had a measure of revenge, but there's something. It reminds me of the end of License to Kill, where Felix is, let's go fishing and having a bit of a laugh on the phone, and he's in hospital missing legs or a leg, and he's just had his wife killed, and he's like on the phone going, "See you next week." There's something a bit like that in this film. It's not deal breaking. I enjoyed it, but maybe it's because, racism is bad. MK was still the message 30 years ago. I'm not suggesting it wasn't, but it's become an even more hot button issue now, and this just all hits a little bit harder now. Just deliberately going around killing black cops and things like that. It just feels worse, and it's all mixed up in the narrative around police and everything else at the moment. So I found this film a lot more unbalanced than the first one. I found it not quite as well paced as the first one, but Mel Gibson is still charismatic and still dangerous as a character, so it gets a more than passing grade from me.
Becca, what are your thoughts?
I can't say fairer than that, really. Yeah, I think it's always one of those things, isn't it? The first film was so successful, proved, a critical and box office smash. Launched Mel Gibson, well, one of the major films that launched Mel Gibson's career, definitely in America. And sort of paved the way to sort of become the sort of actor, director, writer, producer that that he is. He has been for many years. And it's always difficult. The sequel, it takes quite a lot of sort of getting into. So, but ensuring that the first one was a success, paved the way for this film, definitely. I don't know if I prefer it or not. I'm still debating. I only saw it for the first time the other night, and I was like, but no, I will agree with obviously the racism and the anti-South African sentiment of this film. Obviously, is, as you said, both of you, it's very much a film of its time. It is wrapped up in the politics of late 80s, early 90s of apartheid and that sort of thing. I sort of won't go into it too much, but at the time, around that sort of time as well, my parents, for example, they did sort of boycott any produce from South Africa. Obviously, they were obviously really anti-apartheid. Obviously, it's a terrible thing. They would sort of boycott everything. So and that sort of mentioned the offensive term is something that, just because I've got a family in South Africa and it's a bit of a touchy subject, so I won't go on about it too much. And I was just really shocked because it's not something you hear very often. And I was like, oh my god. So I found it quite a difficult watch in that respect. But yeah, no, I would agree. The action scenes are a lot better. The set pieces are a lot more audacious, a lot more shocking. There's a scene where I think one of the wife sort of gets killed in, taking a jump off a diving board into a pool, and it's just a massive explosion, and that was a real shocker for me. Yeah, great action scenes. I would kind of agree that I would kind of say that it's more pacey. Even though it's kind of an hour and a half, 2 hours, I didn't really feel its runtime. It moved along at quite a whip-cracking pace. Joe Pesci, I thought, oh god, he's going to be sort of the annoying, sort of chatty, typically stereotypical sort of character that he plays. No, he was fine, been great, was great, in fact. And again, they still got the chemistry. But yeah, I would kind of agree. But because he's still very much like the Lethal Weapon. He's this time it's personal. And that makes it kind of all the more palpable, I think, for me, definitely. But no, so yeah, I still, if I can enjoy this film, I find it sort of grittier and harder. And despite its difficult subject matter, I still, it's a worthy entry into the franchise for sure. Sorry, it's a bit of a roundabout way, so I didn't organise my ideas properly. So sorry about that.
You've kind of reminded me of it's personal now. It's has an air of that.
Well, it does at the end, especially, doesn't it? Because he finds out who killed his wife and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
and
but
it is personal.
But it's
so it goes on that journey.
But it was personal with Patsy Kensit, and Patsy Kensit in this film far less than I remember.
There was
to be honest, when you said it was Patsy Kensit, I was thinking, some felt like her later roles. I don't know. I think my idea of her reputation is that she's not like a great actor.
Obviously.
Well, this is it. This is what I was thinking. I was thinking, oh my god, she's going to be in it. She's going to be terrible. Blah, blah, blah. But yeah, she's it's a relatively minor role, and she does her role well, and she's very believable as as the kind of main love interest, and it's very sad.
I did believe Riggs was shagging her.
Yes, that was very. That was very believable.
That was the thing I was kind of getting to. It kind of rhymed with that Harry Enfield sketch. She was like, "You loved her, didn't you?"
Yeah, that's
it's like no, you forced her to your house, not forced as in coerced, but forced as in seemed to guilt her a bit into it. To your house once. Within minutes, you were in bed. That went on for a decent length of time. Well done.
He had a dog, so
and then that was it.
You kind of got attacked by machine gun fire. You got away, and then
he nearly got killed, but never mind.
You can just imagine gunfire coming through the window, and you just go, I've never known a man try that in bed before. That's amazing. What a technique. So yeah, he goes off. I mean, he says he killed them. I don't know. I still think it's more caught up in his wife. But
Yeah,
minutes after that,
it is really. But
he's laughing at a joke, a play on words around that late racial slur, and credits, and it's like ha 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 ha. You know, it is like episodes of Star Trek or Thundercats or something where they all laugh together at the end.
I will defend that slightly with two kind of points. One, you could say it's like, gallows humour type thing. You laugh when you're at pain, but he has just essentially just avenged his wife's death, so it's probably be a bit relief from that.
Yeah, it's a little bit like that. It's kind of like if you didn't cry, you'll laugh, sort of thing.
So it's like you get some sort of catharsis from that.
The only thing I'll add on that is that with both films, it is entirely a matter of opinion. Because just tying into what Becca said, preferring Lethal Weapon 2 is not an uncommon view.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it's a majority view.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm
but
just
I
trying to
would
think,
say-
just because I've seen them both recently, I'm kind of thinking, oh, if I prefer, but
I
just because
guess
I've seen them
it's-
recently. But I mean, first one is an absolute classic, and I will,
Yeah.
infinite rewatch value for sure. But oh well, I'm not saying I
No,
don't dislike it.
I'm definitely saying though that it's not a controversial view to prefer Lethal Weapon 2.
Controversial. Oh, it rhymes.
I don't know that it's necessarily, like I say, I don't think it's a majority view, but I think it's like a very, very significant minority view. And I do think that when I'm talking about tone with either of them, I don't think there's an absolute on it. I don't think it's like, well, the first one balances its tone better and the second one does it badly. I think it's literally how you react to it. You can make an argument for what the characters are doing, but I think all I'm saying is I felt more whiplash in the changes of tone this week than I did last week.
Well, I think the reasons why, I think it's kind of why Dave thought it kind of was a bit baggy, and I think the same reason why Becca actually thought it flowed quite well is there was a like a deliberate attempt to add humour to it to this time around, so it's very, very jokey. A lot more kind of like humorous type sort of scenes, lots of back and forth between the characters, especially with Joe Pesci. That was kind of like the comedic
Well, the thing that
sidekick.
springs to mind when you say they've added humour is the whole condom advert bit.
Well, yeah.
I mean, that is just like, I mean, you don't necessarily... Did anyone watching this as an adult, I'd be interested to know because I watched it when I was still a child, but as an adult, I watch it, and of course I think I remember this. I'm pretty sure that I remember it as it's starting to happen. But like as an adult, you can see what's going to happen here. This is going to be an inappropriately adult thing she's advertising.
I mean, the thing I was questioning is like, surely he'd know beforehand. Like, surely you're like, oh, like you're like, oh, you like in an advert. Oh, like, what you advertising?
I filmed an advert. Great. So what's for dinner? It's like, four.
Yeah. Like, surely he'd know before she went on to film it. Surely.
And you also think, yeah, because I think she might still, she wouldn't be a minor because it's a sex-related advert, so she's got to be 18, I would have thought. But you think, A, he'd ask, and B, if they're sitting down to watch an advert where she's going, yes, we use these condoms, she might just tell her father, because she doesn't strike me as cruel. She doesn't look like she's going to, like, revel in making him that uncomfortable. Very strange. But it was funny. It made me laugh, even though I could see the joke, quote unquote, pardon the pun, coming a mile away.
I don't know, it's a bit of a stretch.
Dirty.
I wish it was a bit of a stretch. Anyway, carry on.
So obviously there's more of a attempt to make it more humorous, which is obviously a huge a step away from the original, which is a lot more darker, which is kind of more the Shane Black type sort of tone. So I think there was heading in a lighter direction, and I think the reason why some people will probably prefer this, or might prefer this one, because this is kind of like the balance between the dark, heavy action and the humour. This has like both of them in, whereas like the third one leans a little bit towards a bit more like light-hearted humour.
And the fourth one cast Chris Rock as well as Joe Pesci.
Yes. So it kind of has that unbalance. I think for me it's I agree with what you said, Dave. Is I won't sort of begrudge anyone who says this is their favourite. I think I prefer the first one, though this one is actually always an enjoyable watch for me. The villains are probably more memorable, even though they're in a very sort of bright and colourful, cartoony way. It's like it's weird because whenever I think of South Africa, I always sort of think of this. Like I think this film introduced me to like the South African accent. So whenever I do if I do an impression of South African accent, my head always goes to Lethal Weapon 2, the bad guys.
Yeah, basically,
how they say
you're doing an aging British actor doing a South African accent.
Yes. You're like sort of, who's the dickhead now, officer? My dear officer, you could not give me a parking ticket.
Whereas better would be, I'm South African, you know. What's your first name? I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't try and do. I say it was my grand sister actually lives there, and her family live out there at the moment, and it's just like she wouldn't be able to come back over here. It would just be so difficult. But yeah, that accent does kind of obviously remind me of them because they do that. That's how they sound. But it's just like, oh my gosh, really? I won't try to do it. I'll save your ears. It'll be fine.
Some accents you get a feel for. Certainly, when I hear British accents, I can tell what's wrong with them or right with them. When I hear Brits doing American accents, I can often, because so much of our entertainment is from that country. You can hear South African, bit different. I mean, I'm reasonably sensitive to it. I mean, I would suggest most Brits can't tell the difference between Australia and New Zealand, and I quite clearly can. It's very different.
There are some subtle differences.
But South African, I couldn't tell you whether someone doing it is doing it well or not, within reason.
No, but I think when you've got a sort of a legendary actor like Joss Ackland, for example, you can kind of you can sort of pull it off, that sort of thing, really, because he's got such skill as an actor. I don't know. With regards to this film's cast and some like the more minor roles, I don't know if they recruited, either people who could do really good accents or who were South African themselves, for example. To give that
certainly
authenticity.
His main henchman's an American actor.
Yeah, definitely. So, but I think I won't try to do the accent because it's terrible.
No, I don't, honestly.
I'll go, I don't know.
I love the idea that we won't mention a word in case it's a really, really offensive racial slur, but we'll sit there and do comedy versions of the accent. No, let's leave it.
Did it strike everyone that like all the bad guys kind of look like they belong in an office somewhere? They don't look like your typical like bad guy henchmen.
No, they really don't. I mean,
they kind of look like sort of bold, like slightly balding, like sort of like guys in their 40s who are probably a bit boring.
Henchman, he just looks like, I don't know. If you were in a different universe, you could have cast him in something like Marathon Man, in the sort of, I mean, he would be the wrong age, but you know what I mean? Kind of like a slightly genteel dentist or something who turns out to be quite dark under it all.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like, he kind of looks like he should be like, like a football manager or something. It doesn't, it doesn't help that they're all wearing blazers, that type of thing. But no, I mean, just to wrap up my final thoughts, I guess. I think it's very entertaining. I do think it kind of lumbers away. The plot isn't as tight, but I think the focus is a lot more on like the action scenes and kind of like the comedic sort of like gags and setups, and just sort of the characters just bantering with each other.
Well,
essentially,
would you say that in terms of character motivations and everything else, the film has far less reason for being, possibly even than 3, which I'm not going to argue from memory is a better film, because I'm pretty sure from memory it isn't. But last week they both had very strong and differing motivations and arcs through the plot, whereas this is just their second adventure. This is just their sophomore effort. I don't see the same character drives in our 2 leads.
No.
Which when you're saying the plot is not as tight or driven, I almost feel like the whole enterprise isn't. It's like they haven't quite worked out what their next chapter is.
It is just like Next Case.
Yeah.
And they are just like, they're doing things because they are cops, and that's the motivation. And I mean, yeah, things get a bit personal when they're personally attacked as the film goes on. But I see what you mean. There's no like subtext to any of it. There's no like personal journeys, or I mean, I not that I can see anyway.
No, so I think that's what I kept thinking is, I mean, crap.
I mean, Riggs has the revelation about like what happened, but
yeah. Well, I mean, just off the point, this is going to tie into the point because literally since we've been on air, I've read that Creed 3 has been announced for Thanksgiving next year, directed by Michael B. Jordan himself.
oh,
Now, the point I think firstly, we will cover it because we are in the Rocky business. But secondly, films get announced before we know what they are. Quite often in series, it's like, well, we've made enough money, we'll announce Lethal Weapon 2, we'll figure out what it is. Even with slightly smaller efforts like Knives Out, we know there's going to be a sequel to it, we know it'll be a murder mystery somewhere, but we don't know what. And they probably didn't quite know when they started saying, should we do one? So it's not that I think every film should have this overwhelming reason for being, but I kind of feel this one is kind of spinning its wheels a bit, whereas at least next week they move Riggs on a little bit, or they start to move him on a little bit. But anyway, shall we discuss this film sequentially, folks?
yes, why not? So one of the first things I noticed when this film started was, you noticed like the Warner Brothers kind of like sort of starts off, it's like a Looney Tunes cartoon.
I'm not sure if I noticed.
Yeah, I wondered that as well. I sort of heard strains of like Looney Tunes theme.
Because it's not necessarily like what you see, it's the music. It sort of has, you always expect it to go like,
Yeah, I was going to say the same. I was like, did you hear? So I'm glad you mentioned that, because
It was almost like
it was sort of late one night when I was watching. I thought, did my ears deceive me? So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask the same. I'm glad I'm not going crazy.
It was almost like
Well, I mean, that's very different to where we started the last film, I suppose. I mean, even down to the posters for this film. I mean, the posters for this film were very like a redux of the first one, but in colour, and with them all looking just slightly warmer. You know what I mean? The first film
they look like in a very sort of embrace. They look like a couple.
It did remind me of that pirated version of Thor: The Dark World. Where if you bought it somewhere in like the Far East, there was versions circulating where the cover art was Hemsworth with his arms around Tom Hiddleston instead of Natalie Portman. I don't know if it was deliberate.
Well, this sort of this series could probably be like the ultimate bromance, really, couldn't it? Because even though they are colleagues and they're cops, they are very much partners. Obviously, even though they're married, but.
I did have a Fast and Furious moment at the end when they were talking. I did think, and then they make love,
and then they kiss. There's definitely kind of a bromance there.
The poster to this film, if it wasn't for the fact I think you can see the gun in it, the headline over it could say "Why we're finally adopting."
maybe that's the new film that's coming out. They're gonna make it official.
Yeah. Anyway.
But no, I don't mean that in any sort of disparaging way at all. I mean,
none of us do.
This film is based on the great camaraderie and the great sort of on-screen chemistry between the two leads, definitely. And it's an iconic pairing for sure. And classic movie cops. So
they do play on the development of it, and they do it in the opening scene. So I watched the opening scene twice, or more specifically, I watched sort of the opening 30 seconds of it twice. Because the film seemed to start so abruptly, I thought I'd missed something. Because I definitely missed what you're on about with like the Looney Tunes thing. I must have been shutting down my computer or doing something else. But I caught the start of the scene, and suddenly Mel Gibson is fucking whooping, and I'm like, "What have I missed?" All right, so I let it run a few more seconds, and dispatcher telling them you're about to hit each other, and I'm like, "Hit who?" I'm confused, and I went back and just watched that 30 seconds again, and it is meant to drop you right in the middle of something anyway. But it's like how much he's enjoyed his job, so we can see that he's in a different place, sort of, although he always kind of liked the job. But I just want to skip to the very end of this scene, and perhaps, Chris, you can fill in like the bit in between. But at the end, where they sort of go over to the crashed vehicle, and they think it's in the... They're both talking to the various cops around them and bystanders. like you normally would. Like, can you go and get this, go and do this, create a perimeter, all that sort of thing. But it's garbled nonsense. And I don't know if you picked up on that. And it is almost like that they're so used to each other that they've got a bit of a shorthand and they understand each other whether there's words. But also it was a really high-octane adventure they've just had and their blood's up. So they're just kind of babbling. I don't know if you noticed that.
No, I mean, I was just wondering, like, how the fuck did that guy get away? Because he like, obviously disappears like a fucking ninja.
I had a Nick Fury moment. I assumed he drilled through the road or something.
Yeah, just crashed his car, so obviously, but managed to sort of sneak away without anyone. Because it's not as if like it's like in an area which like lots of like escape exits where or places you can sort of sneak and hide away from the cops. It's like no, the cops around. There's like there was an open area. You would just clearly see him run off somewhere, and it's just like where the fuck did he go? He's like he's a anyway that's.
There was no sign of exit, was there? And I can't imagine if a car lands on...
There was plenty of space. Like, he would have clearly been seen no matter where he went.
Well, without getting into...
Other than the back of the shop, which is the one place that the cops don't actually go in.
Well, it's only the fact that... I mean, the one thing in films that's like... I wouldn't say a bugbear of mine, because it doesn't matter. It's just, part of the language of these films. But... when a car lands on its roof, you ain't getting the door open, are you? You know what I mean? The whole frame's like bent and screwed up. It's not really going to work. So you can't really see how he got out. And they were on that car very, very quickly. So it really doesn't matter. It's just to reintroduce the characters and also imply, because they pick up on the accent. Both units that are driving, the other one's got Dean Norris in it. Mm. They're chasing each other to chase a suspect, basically. And they're taking bets back at the courthouse on who's going to win. Who's driving? Murtaugh and his wife Snooze, whatever. And it's like, oh, no, I'm not taking that bet, So I can understand what they're trying to do here, but it's a really strange thing it's a strange way to play the scene. I don't know. But anyway, it reintroduces us. They pick up on the accents. If you're in any way sensitive to accents watching this film, you'll pick it up as it's certainly intended to be South African. Yeah,
they don't know that. They're like, is that Japanese? I don't know. It's like there's a random accent on the thing. They're chasing two cars and they both split up. And one where the other cops sort of chase and the other one where Riggs and Murtaugh are chasing. And it sets up this thing where it's Murtaugh's wife's car constantly getting like damaged throughout the entire movie. It comes like a recurring joke within the film.
It reminded me of the car from like National Lampoon's Vacation. It just seemed very like, it's like I can't imagine that. I'm surprised they're that proud of it, but there you go.
Yeah, and it's beige as well. it's a beige type look.
It is like It's an old man's car, really.
And of course it does its thing where they catch up with one set of the villains, and like a helicopter just turns out from fucking nowhere. It's like repeated the first time. A helicopter turned out from fucking nowhere.
Yeah.
with no sound. So the guy crashes the car, B gets away, but they find lots of like gold coins, and fun fact: midway through, Spielberg apparently visited the set during the filming of the opening scene at some point.
Did he?
Yeah, because apparently he liked the first one so much he wanted to come visit, but it was also he was like probably filming or about to film Last Crusade as well.
Yeah, I suppose this year.
Yeah, so Richard Donner sort of said, I wondered if he was just making sure that that we
were
were fucking up or not.
He just said the scriptwriter did both, so he could easily meet his friend Jeffrey Bone on set. So yeah, that's entirely possible. The main point of this scene is they're chasing somebody. There's South African elements to it. The guy gets away. That's about it, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and then we're back at the police station. Riggs in a straitjacket.
Oh, the bit we've missed. Sorry, the one bit we've missed is when they bust open the boot of the car, the trunk, and a load of gold coins come out, which is basically Krugerrand, which I assume is the South African currency. Although it looks like sort of those chocolate things you get at Christmas. It doesn't look
Probably
like
was.
real money to me.
Yeah, it's almost like sort of treasure gold, isn't it?
Yeah, again, set up and payoff. We see Riggs in a straitjacket. I think it was quite clear to me, certainly as an adult watching now and knowing how films work, that that's going to pay off later.
Yeah.
I seem to. I think I saw. I think I saw Lethal Weapon 3 after Lethal Weapon 2, because I saw him do similar in that film, to put his shoulder back, and I think he might have done it more often in that film, like they lent on the joke more. And then, of course, I went back to this film. I'm like, okay, they're just expanding out on something they did here.
Yeah. I don't remember that in the first, but anyway, we'll get to it. I remember Rip Murtaugh kicking a bottle, one of those big sort of water cooler things.
I've got this image in my mind of Riggs doing it in the third film. I thought it was on like a building site or somewhere. It was definitely outside.
Yeah, you could be right, because I've seen the third film less, so my memory of
I've
it
seen
is
it once, so I could be completely wrong. Anyway, go on. Sorry.
yeah. So Riggs in his shape sets up that, and you also get the setup for Murtaugh's daughter and the first TV appearance. Riggs makes it publicly known to us, hey everybody, well, watch it, channel whatever it is, channel 8 at 7 p.m. or whatever it is.
Johnny's. Yeah.
And then so we see Murtaugh go back to his home. They're having work done in the house. Is he having like a big garage extension for his boat? I think that's what it is.
It's just to be honest, I think it almost doesn't matter what. I think it's almost the film has to. It needs a reason for his wife not to be there, but I think also this film is constantly going to remind us of the slight generational difference between him and Riggs. So Riggs in this film is going to have what it turns out, because of circumstance, to be a one-night stand, but a one-night stand in like a trailer by the beach, and the older guy is having like home improvements done.
Yeah.
Entirely different forms of erection.
And he's having the whole family's there watching. Obviously the big point, he can't have tuna because of like. Yeah, because of like the caught up in dolphins. Yeah, which is something that I don't remember. I mean, I don't remember that doesn't come back. That's not like something that pays off or something, is it? It's just like
it's just a thing. Again, I think that's meant to be humorous in some weird way. I think that's meant to be A, women are socially conscious, and B, Murtaugh's outnumbered. And he's got wife and oldest daughter trying to teach him like proper ethics.
Yeah.
It doesn't pay off. It's something and nothing. I think it's more. I think the worst thing you can do in the scenes in the house is think of everything as like having payoffs. It's more the fact that we're having time with them, around the sort of the family.
And then so everyone's got like this other kid called George. He appears to be like the current boyfriend of his daughter, and yeah.
To be honest, if I was him, remembering how he looked in this film, and how young he looked, I'd feel very insecure watching her in a condom advert with the guy that was in the advert, because it's the sort of guy who would just kick sand in his face.
Yeah. And yeah, it's now for Rubber Johnnies.
Rubber Johnnies. I don't know if that's how our American friends refer to them. Write in. Do you expect us to? If you wear Rubber Johnnies, write to us.
We haven't heard that term since school.
Rubber Johnnies. I've never used it. Yeah, I've never used it as an adult. I've never said to a woman, "Do I have to wear a rubber Johnny?"
Quick, Rubber Johnny. Sorry, Chris. I don't mean to laugh. Sorry.
We'll be back. I've got to go and get some Rubber Johnnies.
Ripped for your pleasure.
Start by yourself, love.
So
oh my god, sorry. Right.
Hey, do you reckon Becca's had some funny flashback there?
Oh, I'm just laughing too hard.
She's like, oh, I remember.
Oh, I remember it well.
Coughing so
While
much,
I'm
it just
heading
literally
down
came
to
out
the
my
garage,
nose. So I'm like, oh,
stay here and
dear.
play with this latex Mac. Give you the general idea of what's on its way.
Wish.
Anyway, yeah. So it's an
Yeah.
advert for Rubber Johnnies, and we
It
have
was
never
hilarious
sound.
though how she doesn't tell her, her dad obviously, and it's just like he's like, everybody get the kids upstairs. He's just seething in front of the TV screen, just like, oh,
Ever
great.
sounded more British as except when I suggested like hobnobs for the Queen. Have we ever sounded more British than when we've sat here discussing the fact that this film has a Rubber Johnny commercial?
Oh dear.
That is a term you probably won't hear outside of schools.
No,
If you're lucky,
that since
not the teachers.
my teenage years. Oh my god. No offense to you, Chris. No offense at all.
Oh no, none taken. If anything, I'm glad I said it for comedic effect. So there you are.
Great.
Yeah, so yeah, Myrtle's embarrassed. Like obviously,
Anyway, moving on.
even the workman's there. Go, yeah, maybe want to go buy Rubber Johnny right now.
Sorry, I've forgotten that line, and you've just said it as I was trying to drink tea, which makes me sound even more British. I had a mouthful of tea then.
Was your pinky up? As long as it's pinky, your pinky is up, you're fine.
No. I was aware we've got a worldwide audience, so I'm trying to drink it normally. Anyway, right.
Yeah.
So, yes, what makes me. He doesn't say, for the avoidance of doubt, he does not say the dialogue that makes me want to buy a Rubber Johnny.
I think he says, "I just makes me want to go buy rubbers right now." I think he says.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, Murtaugh kicks his daughter's friends out. In a typical way, he just reminds him that he's got a gun. I have a gun. So yeah, we cut to next scene is we're introduced to the villains. It's what's his name?
Well, the guy they were chasing was called Hans.
Yes.
And the Joss Ackland's character is called Arjen, I think.
Yeah, Arjen Rudd or something. Yeah.
Well, I'm only going by. I don't know if there's sort of a link to the Dutch language, because the only thing that made me think of was Arjen Robben, the footballer, who was Dutch. And I don't know. If
Well, there is, yeah.
So,
Yeah, because they are like colonised by
Joss
Dutch, weren't they?
Ackland, about 2 weeks ago, turned 93. He's still alive at the time of recording, but we won't put too much stock on that. Yeah, he said he's having like decoration done because there's basically like a rubber mat, not a Rubber Johnny, a rubber mat in his office, and he basically just shoots Hans for the fact that like
You
was
failed
not-
me. It's a bomb.
Yeah.
It's a typical bomb. That's got to be like that's got to be a trick made by the Bond series, though. It's like, sort of sat behind a desk stroking a cat, like sort of pressing a button because you failed. I will not tolerate failure.
Yeah,
Very
much. Yeah. So yeah, he shoots him. There's a callback on that later where is sort of the other guy, what's he called, Vorstedt, has like quite a funny line based on it, because he's later on there saying, he's basically saying to Vorstedt how he failed, and he's just looking around. He said, well, I'm just checking I'm not stood on rubber. He's got plastic rather, and it's plastic because he's about to shoot him. Some of the blood everywhere. So what do we learn? Do we learn anything about them at this point? Do we realise that he's a console yet?
No, we just sort of. Well, I think we just introduced that sort of they're the bad guys and they're the ones up to something.
Yeah.
It's a very brief scene anyway. It's not like, because I think the big reveal about all that it happens later on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's going to be fairly soon because they're taking off the case.
So
the captain's having a go at Murtaugh and say it's going to come out your budget, or our budget, not his budget, but the department's budget.
But before that, we have the scene where like Riggs is chatting with Murtaugh's wife about the death of his ex-wife.
Yeah, we learned that they were due to go out for, I don't know if it was an anniversary meal, but it was certainly a romantic meal. And he said that he was up to his nose in work, and he forgot all about it. And she's obviously sat at whatever restaurant it was. He didn't get in till midnight. As he got in, the phone was ringing, which of course he answered to be told she'd been killed in a car crash. And he said, well, if I'd made it there, obviously it's very likely I'd have been driving. With what we find out later, the outcome may not have been any difference. But I've never taken it as a women drivers reference. It's more the fact that if I was driving a car and was in a fatal accident, if someone else had been driving it, the chances are they wouldn't have been, because there are variables.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
We drive at different speeds at different times on different roads and different routes and everything.
She wouldn't be driving at that time as well.
No, because they'd have had a meal and like headed off like an hour earlier or whatever, or 2 hours earlier or whatever, or even later, because he said I think she waited around for an hour or something for him. So yeah, if they'd stayed for a meal, it would have been longer. Yeah. So anyway, he carries the guilt.
It's more of a what if it was me driving? Would it be any different? Would it?
It's just the way the world has changed. It would be easy to look back on it and say, God, if only I was there to do it properly or something. And that's not what the film appears to be saying to me.
No.
So yeah, they're just popping back the straitjacket thing. He can dislocate and relocate his own shoulder when he needs to. That's the point for later on. Then what?
We see Riggs back at home with his dog, but then we have.
What's he watching? Is it like the Three Stooges?
Or something? That's always a thing that his character always watches at home.
Yeah, and he's laughing at it quite heartily.
And then Murtaugh gets attacked by the South Africans because they break into his home and give him like a warning. Now, one of the things that you know, obviously this is gonna reference the slur, because the slur does get said here. But he's like, afterwards they're like, oh, I can't really tell where these people are. Like, you know, they had this sort of weird accent. What are they? They're like, well, they called you a distinctive word that only a certain people from a certain place say. So I think that's a bit of a giveaway. I don't know. I just thought, hang on, you're not being very good detectives here. I mean,
I was amazed no one recognised it. I mean, we're at the end of the 80s here. It's not like the 50s or something.
Yeah.
We've got worldwide travel. We've got sportsmen and women. You know, the Olympics, and you know, the odd star turns up with their original accent, be it on TV or film.
Even if it didn't trigger you, you think like, oh, well, he called me this, or he said that, which is weird. It's like, oh, he must be South African then. Do you know what I mean? You know, you sure
I'm amazed none of them knew. The fact that any one of them doesn't know, in what is, no offence meant to any of our listeners, quite an insular country in its own way. I mean, the rest of the world doesn't really matter to a lot of you that much. I can understand any one of them not knowing. I can't understand, like, 4 of them were on that chase. And it was over an open line where they heard voices and stuff like that. I thought somebody would know. That sounded South African to me. Or at least someone would guess something closer. Not geographically, but some you know, somebody would say something Southern Hemisphere that was like in the right ballpark. But no, they didn't. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, they refer to it as a shitty accent, which is probably like a dig at South Africa. But so yeah, this is like the back at the police station. They basically sort of get dumped with like basically babysitting assignment because they want, you know, taken off the case, and they go straight to Leo gets.
He's in a hotel.
Yeah,
we've seen this in a lot of films. You know, the guys who turn against the mob or whatever. They're put in top hotel suites and all the rest of it. It's very much of that nature. It spoils the reveal that they're about to be attacked pretty much straight away, because the guy with the trolley cart is stopped and asked, which room is this for? Now, I think at the outset, how you respond to this film is going to be a little bit how you respond to Joe Pesci. Now, I think Joe Pesci's done some extraordinary work in his career. I think he's meant to be irritating in this film because they keep telling him to shut up. Yeah. But I don't know if that irritation's meant to be funny to us or just we empathise with their irritation at it. because
Well-
I don't find it funny. I don't find him funny.
Well, I'll tell you what, the thing I would take away from it was just for how good an actor is Joe Pesci, because, you know, he can play sort of like, you know, kind of charming, like sort of like funny comedic, sort of irritating type of guy, to being really sinister in like in a Scorsese
I was
film.
going to say that you'd never mistake this guy for any kind of threat.
Yeah,
And it's the least hot take I'll ever come out with because it's so mainstream, and I'm the several millionth person to say this. But anyone who hasn't seen Goodfellas, go and see it. He's phenomenal in it.
yeah.
He really is. He's the best thing in that film, I would say.
But even like something like Home Alone, where he is more comedic, but he does have his threatening moments. Like, you know,
But he's not meant to terrify kids watching it.
yeah,
So he's very good at what he does, and I thought he was brilliant in The Irishman last year. He can do most things, you know. And from irritating in Goodfellas, you go and watch him in like, say, Raging Bull, which is also a Scorsese film and also opposite De Niro, and the dynamic's totally different because De Niro in that film is the character that's like irrational and temperamental, and it's always like his brother who's trying to fucking calm him down and talk sense into him. So yeah, he can do pretty much everything. Apparently, pretty good singer as
Yeah.
well. I've never heard his stuff, but yeah.
and he's really good in My Cousin Vinny as well. That was a film I watched fairly recently.
My Cousin Vinny is one of those films that tends to get ragged upon is too strong. It's not ragged upon. People tend to like it. But it gets a little bit ragged upon, I suppose, for want of a better expression, because Marissa Tomei won an Oscar for it. And everyone was like, really, this lightweight comedic role? And the film gets a little bit looked down at because it's technically an Oscar winner. But if you treat it as what it is, like a light comedy from the early 90s, it's pretty good, and he's really good in it.
It's a good courtroom film as well.
Yeah, the thing is, when you watch it as like, it looks like a bit of a sort of semi-star vehicle, because he was sort of a star, Pesci. He was always like the supporting guy. And it's out and out a comedy, and it's got a small town fish out of water feel, a bit like Doc Hollywood or something like that. But when you actually get down to it, the court stuff is really well handled. It's got Fred Gwynn in it as well, Herman Munster as the judge.
Yeah.
And they're defending the Karate Kid.
Yes. So yeah, definitely worth watching. So we've gone off track there now. So yeah, so yeah, so yeah, you'll get. So this is pretty. I think this is kind of probably. I think this is kind of sneakily the role that Pesci's kind of known for. Really, you think it'll be more sort of Goodfellas or something like that, but you know, it's the kind of okay. You know, it instantly kind of like sort of,
stylistically, it's closer to how you would picture him in your mind from the majority of his roles.
Yeah.
Because even in My Cousin Vinny, he turns out to be quite smart under it all. But he's going everywhere and irritating people. Because he's going to a small town, he gets all the sort of court protocols wrong. He goes in places and asks slightly inappropriate questions and stuff like that. Stylistically, yes, but I think the epithet that, I don't know, I tend to think, you know, where it would say, you know, when Christopher Reeve died, the obvious example, Superman star, Christopher Reeve died today at the age of whatever. What would that word be? I still think it would be Goodfellas.
yeah.
Just the
Probably.
one word, but no, the style, you're probably right. This is as close to a signature Joe Pesci role as you can get, because something like Goodfellas, he's phenomenal in it, and he's got the same irritable quality to him, but it's an outlier in the stuff he does.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's probably more. Yeah, people sort of tend to sort of think he's like, oh, Pesci's like kind of this really aggressive, scary actor. He does gangster flicks, but actually does a lot of comedy.
Now, the majority of stuff, he's fast talking and a little bit irritating, but deliberately by design. I don't mean he's an irritating screen presence particularly. Got huge respect for Joe Pesci. I just think he's always been very, very good. What he can't do is blend into a role. I mean, it's always so obviously him, and he's got a lot of the same characteristics in whatever he does, but he can turn his hand to most things, even quite charming. And for a little short guy who isn't classically good looking in any way, that's quite an achievement. They've got to look after him, but it turns out the waiter has sort of been hijacked and replaced, and the hitman pulls a pistol on him. And basically, they all sort of dive out the window except Murtaugh and land in a swimming pool. And Leo's got a couple of a busted nose by the look of it.
The bad guy gets away, and they're back at Murtaugh's house now. Because should note that since the attack, Murtaugh family's got they sent them away to like a relative somewhere for safekeeping, as seen as like they've been like attacked at home kind of thing.
This is where what I'm getting at. That as we go on, I mean, it's not quite yet, but this film does get pretty dark. It doesn't have the sort of the darkness on a sort of personal level, in terms of one of our leads being suicidal, but going around and just shooting all the black cops is really quite dark.
Yeah, well, there were quite. I mean, there are quite a few. We don't just kill like the black cops though. It's like it is just like even though they aren't like.
I think it was all the black cops in that department. I mean, Dean Norris gets caught as collateral damage because he's at like Grandale Bush's house playing cards, and
Shapiro, the Janet Goldstein character as well.
Yeah.
She gets anyway. So basically they're back at Murtaugh's house, and Leo is explaining to police officers about how laundering money works. And this was the scene that sort of just said, let's explain it to the audience, because they might not know. But I'm thinking, but the cops, surely they fucking understand the basic concepts of money laundering. Like, surely.
I have to say, I had to play it twice, because I don't know if I just wasn't concentrating. This is the thing with me. I love films, and I love films in any environment. I'm happy to watch them at home. I know it's thought of as heresy, but I have watched them on my phone and stuff like that. I mean, it's not ideal, but I have done. But there is something about a cinema that I concentrate better, and it does. I follow things fine at home, but every now and again there's like a slight distraction. I'm going to watch that scene again because I'm not sure. And it lost me at the point where I give you money and you give me money, but you don't give me money, and it lost me a little bit. But obviously I know what money laundering is. If you've ever worked in an office job in the public sector, they teach you what money laundering is. If you ever work with money, they teach you what money laundering is. If you've ever bought a house, you need to know what money laundering is, because they perform various checks on you to assume that you're not money laundering. Money laundering is basically hiding the origin of ill-gotten gains so that it looks legal enough. It doesn't raise any eyebrows. And he explains this, and I don't think he actually gives the most user-friendly explanation of it, but it does tell you that he's morally flexible, to say the least. He's laundered $500 million, and he's taken 2% of that. So he's got to be worth a fair amount of money, or at least he was before he started having to run away from it all. But he was skimming money here and there from them. He's meant to be a witness for something, but I wonder what, because he said he only met couriers. The one bit that really stuck about his explanation of how it works is you don't meet the man, you meet the man's man. You know what I mean? So I don't really know. But he does explain how money laundering works to two cops who didn't recognise the South African accent and know nothing about money laundering, despite the fact Riggs worked in narcotics and Vice, I think. I mean, they are both industries that attract their share of money laundering. He should know what it is.
Well, that's what I mean. It's like, surely. But okay. So...
Yeah,
but it's for the sake of the audience, really, and also explain that what he actually did, why kind of like he got caught out, so and that's why he's like gone to the cops to kind of basically save his ass, basically.
Yeah.
But they decide like, oh no, well it was he sort of has a name for him, so they decide to go and investigate. Like they have like a place, an address. It was like some sort of place on like on the hills and stilts. So they kind of like, let's try and go figure it out then. And
they get it down to some possibilities, and when they work out which one it is, Riggs is there pretending to be a pool cleaner and there's no pool, which is kind of funny. But it does strike me as the sort of thing that like could theoretically happen, that you would you play a hunch and it may not work. We talk
Yeah.
going back to things like 24. You know, there are scenes in that program where they answer the phone, and he's just killed the person whose phone it is, or the person whose phone it is has just died or disappeared or whatever. And they answer the phone.
It's like in Bond, isn't it?
You answer the phone
In,
and
Quantum of Solace.
pretend and hope the person has never met you.
Yeah, it's like
That
in
sort
Quantum
of
of
thing.
Solace, isn't it?
Yeah, Mr. Slate.
Yeah.
Exactly the same principle. Just right. We'll turn up. We'll pretend to be this person. Let's hope they never met each other. It's that kind of thing. Let's turn up to clean the pool. It's in a reasonably well-off part of the city. They probably got a pool. They didn't, as it turned out.
Yeah, so they sort of like beat up to the guy, and then the guy shows up who was there at the hotel, and it goes into a bit of a chase scene. And yeah, it ends up he gets a surfboard through the head ultimately after the chase, and they return with the other cops where we first proper meet the South Africans. And this is one of the weird things. Like Mel Gibson, it's one of those weird things where like an American in an American film says something distinctly British. It's like, say, he calls them dickhead twice, which is not something like he kind of, it's usually asshole or something like that. You know, it's like when Americans say wanker. It's like, no, that doesn't sound right.
You scoundrel! If you're American and has called anyone a dickhead, write to us at expectustotalk@gmail.com. He grew up. He grew up. He spent. I mean, he is American, Mel Gibson, but he spent a lot of his childhood and early adulthood in Australia. So, and again, I don't know the nationality of the guy who wrote this. American, I imagine, but who knows? Unless he's suddenly become an expert on South Africans and that's what they call each other. I don't fucking know. But yeah, it just stands up. He does call him Adolf, which is kind of again quite a charged reference about what the perception of this nation was at the time. And Rudd explains that they've got diplomatic immunity.
Diplomatic immunity.
Yeah, the film has to explain that because not everyone would. You would get the gist from the two words, diplomatic immunity. You would probably understand that, like, no one can touch you. But the film has to explain it to some degree. It has to, because immunity can mean different things, and you can't just assume all your audience will get it. And it does explain it, that effectively where they are is effectively a sovereign state. And it is just part of the whole diplomatic relations that we don't get charged with laws on in these other countries.
Yeah, because they're under the laws of their country, not the country they're in.
Yeah, but that's only technically in the embassy. I mean, if you went outside, theoretically, if you're in the U.S. embassy in London, you're on U.S. sovereign land. But if you go outside and like shoot someone, you've shot someone on British land. So I don't quite know how that works, but certainly the concept of diplomat.
It certainly seems like a bad idea to sort of just allow, if that was...
It's like an incredibly bad idea. But there you go. It is what it... Well, we've had real-world equivalents where things have happened and they've just said, no, we're not giving them over for, questioning or whatever. That hit-and-run incident last year. We meet Patsy Kensit briefly, who's Joss Ackland's sort of secretary, I suppose.
Yeah.
And...
Riggs flirts with a little bit.
Flirts with her quite a bit, and he goes to grab the suitcase, and he's immediately told that's protected by subsection this of diplomatic laws, and basically you can't touch that. That's it, and I think they go and talk to the captain, and because they've just basically been reported for doing this.
And he finds out that he took Leo with him and left him in the car and all that kind of shit.
Yeah,
it's like great. And then the guys leave a rubber tree for Murtaugh.
Disgraceful behaviour. that could qualify as workplace bullying, Chris.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. Although, good news about the free condoms.
Yeah. So yeah, next scene is like, it's basically your type, like, yeah, do everything really despicable with the bad guys, because he basically makes he tries to chat Rika up, like trying to make a move while spouting racist stuff. Like, it's like, oh, these damn blacks, they just hate us, oh, blah blah blah, and kind of like tries to sort of make a pass at her at the same time. It's just like, the movie's doing like overkill.
It plays her as willfully clueless as well, and I don't mean dumb. They're two different things. It's like she knows the politics of her country is unpopular. This is just a job she doesn't really want to know. She actually says, "Well, no, I don't really understand. You're welcome to try to explain it to me." Well, the people here hate us, and the police is crawling with blacks, basically, for want of a more accurate way to describe the way they say it in the film. Did you take it as he was coming onto her? Did you?
Well, yeah, he kind of touched her face a little bit, and she's like, "Ugh."
Yeah, okay.
But
that's not appropriate employer-employee. Yes, okay.
But yeah, I forgot what I was going to say now. But yeah. Oh yeah, it was kind of like with her. It's kind of like said later on that with Riggs that she's sort of like, she doesn't really agree with the politics, but likes a job because it keeps her in America.
Right.
So she likes
pay off to that line later, because he says to her, "There's better ways to stay in America," which is a hint at a possible future for them had things played out differently. But it is also like there are other ways. Where next? Riggs kind of just.
So you have the drive-through scene. So with
it's just pointless.
Yeah, it is just like a comedy show.
Yeah,
but it's like the fuck you bit is something that's played in the other movies.
It's funny. Mel Gibson's character Riggs comes out with quite a lot of inadvertent gay innuendo in this film. He does talk a lot about like fucking people's asses and stuff like that, and it's like, if you do this, I'm gonna fuck your ass, and it's like, are you sure that's what you mean, Mel? Anyway,
so Riggs is basically sort of like harassing.
Yeah, he's just turned up in the car being.
So it's like, okay, I can't arrest you. I'm gonna play the intimidation game.
Yeah, which is what it is. I
like how he gets there, like he dashes off on a red light, causes a car crash with his diplomatic immunity, whatever, and he gets to work and Riggs is there. It's like, how the fuck did he get there so quick?
Yeah. Yeah, it is a little bit like he's just a shadow. He turns up everywhere. Yeah. But various scenes of them sort of around each other's houses and stuff like that. What else?
Leo's cleaning Riggs' house.
Yeah.
Then you hear no sign of Murtaugh, and then this is where we get the toilet scene.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a shit situation, really, isn't it?
Hey, no pints of bitter either.
No.
I like the fact that they talked about what he was reading first. Yeah, they haven't seen him for a while, so they actually they go to the house and he is on the toilet, and we find out through the scene he's been sat there since the previous night because there's a bomb attached to the toilet that's been sort of activated by him sitting down, and if he stands up, it'll go off. And he doesn't know any of this, but he daren't move. And when they do actually check it, it's like, no, you got to stay there. And they wrote "Boom, you're dead" on the toilet roll. The bit that is funny is he says, don't call the bomb squad, or don't use the police band, keep the incident private. He said, you can trust me, and the next thing it's chaos outside. That is funny. There's the cut from "you can trust me" or "no problem" to like the street being full of people. But the gist of it is they've got to jump off the toilet into the bath, which will withstand the blast. And they put something on the bomb to delay the explosion for a few seconds.
Yeah, that's it. Liquid nitrogen.
Yeah. Now, apart from the fact they have an unspoken bromancy moment, where he says like Riggs and can't speak, and it's like, I know, buddy, and then they make love. That's
in the bathtub. Yeah, and also the toilet actually sort of is is shot outside the window and on Murtaugh's car again.
Yeah. So presumably he must have flushed. Because there wasn't like some big turd flying out.
Well, I mean, you would do, wouldn't you? You wouldn't want to make the situation worse by everyone coming in smelling your shit, would you?
It's sort of busy work, but it's an iconic scene. It's very well known. I think the next scene is where him and Murtaugh go to the South African office.
Yeah, so they sneak in basically.
Yeah.
With like Leo.
Murtaugh loudly announces he wants to go there to fight for the freedom of his brothers, basically.
Well, Riggs like sort of basically it's a distraction for Riggs, and he sneaks in and basically just gives them a warning.
Yeah.
He's like, that's the thing that might be the way he says like, "I'll fuck your asses."
Yeah, but that was in all the trailers as well. Sometimes they go a bit crazy, like now. It's a sort of equivalent of him slapping his face in the first one.
Yeah.
This film, and it does feel ballsy. None of these guys are that physically intimidating, but there's a fair few of them all armed. It does feel like quite a ballsy move watching it earlier.
Yeah, it definitely. But it's Riggs, isn't it? That's him.
Yeah. Is that when he sort of gets out? Well, he shoots the aquarium, and then they're all busy trying to sort of save the fish rather than do anything to him. And he goes out and talks to Rika. Is that when they sort of like arrange a date?
Not just there, but I think it's literally just afterwards, because they meet up in the supermarket straight after that.
Yeah.
I mean,
of course they do, because he tells her to take the fruit from the pile. Yeah.
This is where kind of like publicly harasses her in public.
Again, I don't think this film is, apart from the racial stuff we've already talked about, I don't think this film is wildly inappropriate. But there's a few things that you just look at and go, and it's not even about it being Mel Gibson or anything. It's just one of those things that you say, would you do that the same way now? I don't think you would play this scene the same way now, because with modern sensibilities and sensitivities, it could be interpreted that he's almost kind of like bullying her back to his place. It's played as charm. It's not intended to be.
Yeah.
But you just know that criticism would launch at the film if they released it this way now. They'd have to just tweak it a bit.
Yeah, they probably would.
This is setting up the final scene of act of the film now, isn't it?
Pretty much, because he's taking her back to the apartment, and this is where basically like everyone starts getting offed. So all the other police officers start like getting they're turning up the heat. So like the swimming pool getting diving board getting exploding.
Becca's not saying much. I just wondered, did we lose her at Rubber Johnny's?
I laughed too hard.
That's what I meant.
I went down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
We've gone quite quickly towards the latter half of the film. I think that's kind of really what I mean is, despite its kind of hour and a half, like 2 hour runtime, I didn't kind of feel this movie drag. I mean, I would agree that, they said at the start of the film, like, tonally might be sort of different here, there, and it's definitely funnier. There's more comedic elements compared to the first film. But it's still, for me, it still kind of retains that edge, that kind of that grittiness. Hasn't gone down the route of, the stereotypical like silly buddy cop movie, for example. Even with Joe Pesci, with playing that sort of character that he's made a career out of, didn't sort of really grate too much, or sort of tonally clash with what was going on. Very very enjoyable, definitely. And we arrive quite quickly at the the last half of the film, where it all begins to get personal. So.
It's personal now. So the police are basically getting offed.
Sorry.
The police start out getting killed by 1-1. No one's sort of heard from Riggs or Murtaugh, but yet the captain doesn't seem to say, have you tried maybe going around the houses? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but we've established they're not very good detectives. They can't even work out an accent and a racial slur. And they don't know what money laundering is. They probably don't understand the whole concept of people living in different places.
Because Kelsey Breeze, that's exactly where Riggs is. and that's exactly where Murtaugh is heading. That's where we find.
Yeah.
I must say, during this part of the film, there is a bit of exposition. There's a lot of Basil exposition going on. It's like, oh, this is where we have to go. But yeah, no, with the money laundering thing, I totally agree. It's like, if they are diplomats, even if they're criminals, how do they not know? It's ridiculous.
It's the fact that Riggs and Murtaugh don't know, and they've worked in
This is
vice
it,
and
exactly.
narcotics
It's like,
and
what?
stuff. I mean, it's just basic stuff.
They're cops. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. There you go.
It's like I've yeah. How can you not know? I suppose, and if you've had any kind of professional role in your life, you should know what it is. But never mind.
But there you go. Doesn't matter.
Anyway.
It's probably like me asking, so what's a heart attack then?
Well, this is it exactly.
So what exactly is a cardiac arrest?
Yeah, well, exactly.
Yeah, that would give the family real hope, wouldn't it? You're in A&E or something, and their beloved relative goes into cardiac arrest, and you just stand there and go, "Cool, 2 or 3 years as a nurse, I've never seen anything like that." That's it. Oh well, we're into the final act of the film. Patsy Kensit goes round to his place. They have a beer, and then they're like, "Make love at length."
Yes.
And the dog watches bits of it, goes away for bits, comes back, watches a bit more.
Yes, disappears round a safe passage.
I know, and he's talking about Mel Gibson, not the dog, is talking about baseball before he says "batter up." So how I didn't get that reference?
Yeah. And he actually sort of says it's a baseball reference.
Yeah, but that's before he says "batter up." I don't know. It's almost like I didn't link the two. I think it might be that I saw this film when I was about 15. Which means I was probably looking at Patsy Kenset's tits while he was explaining it.
It's fair enough.
So that's probably what happened. He probably went, while he's going, yeah, it's baseball and this is what's ever. I'm there going, boobs, and then he suddenly says, "batter up," and I'm going, yeah, I sympathise. All right. But there you go. So, yeah.
Yeah, so Murtaugh
they're
shows
all
at home.
attacked at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, Leo gets taken. Murtaugh manages to kill 2 of them with a nail gun.
Yeah.
And, of course, Riggs being Riggs, they decide to send 2 attack helicopters and just shoot the fucking bomb. They take no fucking chances at all.
Well, yeah, at this around this point, Riggs is told, just after the attack, he's told that when you were in narcotics, you were getting too close to us, so a hit was put on you. I came out to kill you, but of course you weren't driving the car.
Yeah, that's afterwards.
Yeah,
he explains.
But yeah, he doesn't burst in on him balls deep in Patsy Kensit and say that. I know it's after that bit. Batter up. By the way, Mel, apologies if you lose your erection over this, but I killed your wife. Nice dog, by the way. See you later.
We'll be back.
Yeah. We'll just let you finish. Dying man's wishing. Make sure you finish.
I mean, I might be an evil racist, but I'm not. But I'm not that fucking heartless.
Yeah, and make sure you finish her because she's not going to get another opportunity either.
I was making a joke about her acting career, but anyway. So basically, you just have a big Riggs kills everyone, and they manage to drive away. Drops off at her place, but is knocked out.
Yeah,
and then you have your scene where he's sort of in a sort of straight jacket type thing,
underwater.
Yeah, and he
gets out of it. And just as he's about to sort of swim away, he spots her dead under the water as well. So she's dead, and he knows that. So now they've killed everyone, and of course it plays on the character still being somewhat dangerous, at least in our perceptions, that we don't know if he's going to go right off the deep end now. And
So this is one of the scenes that kind of got cut out where when he sort of escapes and kills two of the henchmen.
Right. Why? Was it particularly brutal? I can't remember.
Well, yeah, it's the one where he sort of just basically sort of breaks the guy's neck and kills the guy with a door, the car door. Just smashes him in.
It's political correctness gone mad.
I know. But it always annoys me because you sort of see like two villains who you never see again. You think like, but what happened to him? They're just hanging around, and then you see Riggs get out, and that's it. Yeah. It's just sort of like, no, just have him, let's see him get killed.
Again, that's very Bond villain. I know, put him in a straitjacket and just fucking shoot him. You did with all the other cops you've been trying to kill. Yeah. Because they're going into people's homes, and it's like, I'm a cop, and then and they shoot him. It's just like done. It's quite brutal. Ends up reminding me of the Busey fight, but instead of like being like very vital at that stage, Gary Busey, he's fighting like a bank manager. You know what I mean? This is the guy you go to get like a loan or something.
Yeah.
He's stabbed in the leg, and he ends up sort of stabbing the guy with that guy's own knife. And just as he's about to sort of get away, Joss Ackland shoots him in the back several times. And he keeps firing while he's on the floor. You just think, like, this guy should be dead. And Murtaugh points his gun at him. He says, diplomatic immunity. And then he just shoots him and says, it's just been revoked. Or assimilate this, or bottoms up, or whatever.
Yeah. I think just being revoked is better. That's a better payoff line.
That was a pretty good line, actually. And when they sat, he thinks Riggs is, like, dead or dying, and it turns out he's really not. Nothing vital's been hit. A joke about him being decaffeinated, which is a play on that word, which we're still not going to say just in case, but you can totally infer what it is, and that's it. Credits.
Yeah, and then you have we just kind of rushed through the ending, but yeah, Leo's rescued pretty much, and that's it.
I mean, that's the thing. That's how I feel about the last act of both of the first two films. I'm a little bit like that with Act 3 anyways, but there are plenty of examples of Act 3s I've liked that have proved it isn't just me.
No, but I completely get what you're saying, because
I don't think the plot has interested me as much this time. I think the plot is much more of the draw this time, in that the first film was all about this damaged guy and this cop not near retirement, but almost like retiring himself in his attitude and stuff. This film's not really about any of those things, so therefore it's much more about the plot, but the plot doesn't have the same drive as it does when... I mean, it's a pretty generic drug plot in the first film, but it's being driven by this sense of, can this guy on the case hold it together? Will he put in danger this guy who really just doesn't feel that he's at his best anymore? And that's not there in this film. So when we get to the action series, you like sequences, you've got him fighting a bank manager and 60-odd-year-old Joss Ackland, so I'm not as interested. But, as for final thoughts from me, I'm not going to have very much. I'm just going to say I think it's a step behind the first film, largely because the reason for being's not there in the character work, although the characters are still great. They're still great at being around each other. Their chemistry's moved on even a step. Spot them talking, babbling together at the start of the film where they both know what they're trying to say. There's a genuine sort of bromance there in all the best ways. Joss Ackland would have made a good Bond villain, thinking about it. Not a physical threat. He'd have needed a decent henchman, not the manager of Nat West. The end result's a step behind, but it's still good, and I enjoyed it. Becca?
Yeah, pretty much the same, really. I think having sort of reflected upon it, I think this one and the first one are kind of like on equal footing. Obviously, the first is a classic. But the two is, despite some minor niggles, still is enjoyable. You've still got the central chemistry of the leads and everything. The villains are palpable, definitely. Joss Ackland is a legend anyway. I kind of agree that he would have made a good Bond villain. Awesome that he's still going. Great cast, action scenes. sort of bigger and more audacious. Addition of Joe Pesci, brilliant, and he's in the next. I think he's in the next film, isn't he? And then
He's in
the rest of them. But yeah, no, it's always amazing. Yeah, 8 out of 10.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's a pretty high score.
I've gone from 5 to 10. I don't know why. The ratings are arbitrary. Sorry.
8 out of 5.
8 out of 5.
Yeah, I would say I think it's fairly enjoyable. I think it's probably more enjoyable than the first film, but probably the first film's probably a better film, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I kind of agree. In terms of filmmaking.
I think the actions, well, I think that, as I said before, I think the villains are probably more colourful, and probably a bit more memorable as well. But but ultimately, I think it sort of it overcompensates for the humour too much in regards to the darkness and the violent undertones. You only get a glimpse of that sort of at the very end, where Riggs is kind of like pretty much in a muttering murderous rampage. So yeah,
he feels quite dangerous in the first scene, and he feels quite dangerous towards the end, and that's it.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, it got me thinking how like the bit of the reckless Riggs was that was always him.
Yeah,
he is a lethal weapon.
It's not he's not still a guy on the edge. I mean but that's just him normally. He's always a bit reckless, a bit like happy. A little bit. What's the word? Well, he's just a bit. Always quipping and sort of like busting everyone's chops, kind of thing. But it's only really a few moments, really. It's only particularly at the end where he kind of goes full. I'm a suicidal rampage.
Yeah.
But that's it. But also, yeah, it's probably the last one where he seems properly dangerous, like as in like a lethal weapon.
The last two are just buddy cop films.
Yeah.
They could be called anything but Lethal Weapon, except you want the brand identity, of course.
Yeah. But yeah, that's it. But I suppose, Dave, I still feel I don't know anything about this one. I mean, I've watched it so many times. I'm still clueless.
I'm amazed we've talked about. To be honest, I was going to say something, but I didn't want to embarrass you, because we've talked for nearly 2 hours and you've not mentioned Samuel L. Jackson or Emilio Estevez once. You've not mentioned Scotty from Star Trek. I mean, what on earth are you thinking, Chris? It's so embarrassing.
Have you seen Loaded Weapon 1 now?
No. I'm just looking it up. I was trying to look for a rip of it. I will watch it. At the time,
it feels like it should be on Amazon Prime, though. It's one of those films.
It's not. You still got to pay for it. But the reason, which I'm quite happy to do, but I think to give background as to why I've not seen it. Well, firstly, there's the obvious point: no one has seen everything. But also, you had like that. It played, even though it had National Lampoons in the title, it played like it was going to be like in that Naked Gun sort of airplay groove, right? And they'd already started to get tired. The first Naked Gun was great. The second Naked Gun was really good. Third one wasn't so good. And they just kept knocking out these films like Repossessed and the rest of them, and they weren't very funny. And I saw a trailer for Loaded Weapon that didn't do it any favours. And I was like, that looks a bit lazy. Samuel L. Jackson at that stage wasn't a star. And even now I'd have my reservations, because he is someone who will do a range of different qualities. Let's put it that way. So I've never got round to it. But a lot of people have said a lot of things about it. So I'm assuming I would enjoy it somewhat.
I think it's got fun because it's got Shatner in as well. Shatner and Tim Curry as the bad guys. So
anyway, you didn't mention that once, which means you're clueless. And I didn't mean to embarrass you. But the thing is, as well, I even when I'm really knowledgeable, I don't want to embarrass you. So let's pretend I'm clueless as well. Becca.
Yeah, these are like really boring facts.
So we
so
rebrand.
Not very fun facts, unfortunately.
The boring side of things, great.
I did struggle to find some fun facts for this film, so apologies because they are quite dull. But yeah, fun fact number 1: despite its anti-South African stance, the film was passed uncut by the censors in the country and was a box office success there. Fun fact number 2: the film's body count is 33.
That's actually quite interesting, really, when you think about it.
Which is the highest of the series so far. But yeah, I think that's quite interesting as well. It just kind of shows, sort of, it doesn't always kind of matter, or even though there's a lot of racist terms.
It goes to show that they might be racist, but at least they can take a dig.
Yeah.
Oh dear. So yeah,
That's fun, folks.
fun fact number 3: Danny Glover played Nelson Mandela for the HBO movie of the same title, made a couple of years prior to this. So how about that?
Glover? That's
No, not-
complete misselling. I'd have been disappointed.
Mel Gibson played Nelson Mandela. No,
I'm tuning in to watch a film about Danny Glover, and he's playing Nelson Mandela. I'm
sorry.
Anyway, carry on.
Anyway, fun fact number 4: Shane Black's original script, as you mentioned, Chris, had controversial ending of trying to kill off Martin Riggs' character, but the producer said no, we don't want this. So they actually filmed quite a few different endings, a variety. Audiences obviously favoured the one where he survives. There's also an alternate ending where they all enjoy a Thanksgiving dinner together with Rico, who survived. But in the end, obviously, Richard Donner decided to kill her off, unfortunately. So yeah, there's always various different alternate endings. And...
I mean, he was also touring the idea of having Mel Gibson fly around the world and turning back time to save a life. But
yeah, there's a Superman ending as well.
I like the fact you clarified he didn't kill her off when they had.
No, obviously not.
Because otherwise, that sounds like a sort of R-rated Weekend at Bernie's. That's attendance corpse.
God, that would
reanimate the corpse.
God, can you imagine that ending?
I'm having a go on that till she goes cold. Anyway, more.
There must be an alternate ending of that film somewhere.
You know when you say things and you think, did I really say that?
That's going on the trailer.
Yeah.
Finally, fun fact number 5: the scene at the end where Riggs attempts to pull down the house on stilts using tow ropes in his truck cost over $500,000. Oh my gosh. It was a very expensive scene.
There's more or less the same.
Don't they just say that just makes it so easy that surely that the integrity of that whole building is really compromised when it takes just one guy with a truck to just pull it down.
I'm pretty sure there's a similar scene in Grand Theft Auto 5 fairly early in the game.
Yeah, there probably is actually. It'll be a homage to that film.
Yeah, I didn't place it, but I'm pretty sure they do something very similar.
It's one of these things that if you sort of go watching these films, you do notice kind of all these little references and Easter eggs and callbacks, which is quite good fun, I think.
Anyway, have we finished having fun?
Yeah, unfortunately, those are my not very fun facts. So
I've got a slightly fun fact. The gun that Mel Gibson uses in all 4 of the Lethal Weapon films is the same one that Bruce Willis uses in the first 3 Die Hards.
Cool.
It's actually the same prop gun.
I hope he wiped it off.
Well, yeah, there's a big intertext between the two
Bruce
films.
was quite sweaty in that first Die Hard. I just imagine it being a bit greasy, to be honest. Yeah. That's fun, folks. As for social media, you can find me at the Pasty Kid 1976 on Twitter.
You can find me at Simtronics.
Oh, you could find. Sorry, this is having a Chris night. I do apologise.
Are you mocking me, Becca?
Sorry.
Oh, Becca.
No, I love you really.
You can find me on.
It had nothing to do with me. I only started it.
Yeah, the only one more thing I need to add is though, I did think the sax music started to get a little bit on my tits. And the only real difference I could sort of say was the kind of the African sort of drums in the background.
I think it's a bit sleazy sax, 80s sax.
Yeah, it just started to feel a bit overkill this time around, but we'll see about next week. Anyway, you can find me on Simtronics. You can also find all the old episodes on simtronics.co.uk. And
you can find us on Twitter at Expect Us to Talk, wherever you find your podcasts. Type in Do You Expect Us to Talk? You can find us on there. Don't forget to rate us, review us, and give us a lovely rating, preferably 5 stars and above. Helps us to attract more listeners and rank higher. Thank you very much.
Well, I don't know about you, Chris, but I can't even begin to guess what's coming next. What do you think?
No,
you've drawn a blank.
Is it Wings of Desire?
That's so close. Becca, put him out of his misery.
Do you expect to talk will return with Lethal Weapon 3?